Look, folks, I've been wondering who the Shadow is since Chris's PCG the Nazi Machine came out in like freaking 2005-ish. It's a mystery that at some points I thought we would never find the answer to. But with Chris working on finally finishing PCG Anniversary Special 2, we really might be about to get the answer. So I had to make one final theory before we find out, and this is it.
Hey Chris. Hey Chris. Hey Chris. Hey Chris.
What?
Who's the Shadow?
Get out of here.
Oh, Dave.
With my primary method of finding out having failed, I would have to actually think about the mystery. So, for those not in the know, the Shadow is basically this evil, shadowy figure. It pretty much is as simple as that. We don't know a ton about him. We know he's the guy who created the evil company known as The Company. We do know some other specific details on what he's done, but nothing that really reveals who he is. So, we first saw the Shadow at the very beginning of Series 2 when Chris returned to making paper computer games after many years of not making them. In the first game of that series, Till Time Do Us Part, Zach gets sucked through time and finds himself in like a mashup place where things from different eras are interacting, like a dinosaur fighting a medieval castle and they're under a UFO. And on the last screen of that game, inside the UFO, we find this weird figure standing over a glowing orb. The orb seems to release a wave of energy, and that was the end. We never learned who the figure was, and it wasn't until recently that I found out it was the Shadow. The next time the Shadow shows up is in the Nazi Machine, a few games later. That's when I found out someone named the Shadow exists. So in that game, Zach is sent back in time to the 1940s, where we find out that someone called the Shadow has sold a powerful fighting robot to the Nazis, and the Russians were trying to kill him because of it. They blew up a shack where he had recently been. We never actually see the Shadow in this game, which makes it all the more intriguing. Like, there's this figure working behind the scenes, and we don't know who he is. Most intriguingly, Chris wrote in the script for this game that the Shadow would go on to create the company sometime after the events of the game. The company, for those not in the know, is the evil organization I'd been fighting since the very first paper computer games, and we'd never known anything about it, like who leads it or who started it. I just keep getting attacked by their henchmen and robots and foiling their evil plans. We never knew why. After that, we didn't see the Shadow again until PCG Anniversary Special 2, which I'm currently playing. So in this game, the Shadow shows up when Zach accidentally crashes into the rich kid's castle and he fights a room full of ninjas. So the Shadow appears on a TV screen.
For a second, instead of Zuvak, it's the Shadow. And it just goes, well done, Zach.
Zuvak thinks the weird reality warping effects happening are caused by the Shadow, and finally, after visiting an alternate reality, Zach returns to see the Shadow has taken over, messing up the world with weird reality warping effects. We also find out that the Shadow has a base on the moon, which is called the Shadow Realm. Apparently, it's been guarded by this being called the Guardian of the Shadow Realm for tens of thousands of years. So that's interesting. I managed to get inside, and that's how far I've gotten in the game. So what is all of this telling us, right? Like, supposedly the Shadow is the guy who created the company in the 1940s, yet somehow he's still hanging around in the present day, running the company and the Shadow Alliance, which is an alliance made of smaller evil organizations like the company, the Nazis, and many others from other planets. So that's Lily, right? So for those not in the know, Lily, originally known as Lust, is an Umbrian who's been alive since the beginning of time. She's from Pierre's paper computer game, Exile, and she keeps coming back over the eras many times with many different faces. So she totally would have been around in the 1940s, right? She's immortal. She's like canonically, she's known to have been manipulating the company for a long time. In fact, it fits so well, I literally almost made it canon. When I was working on the PCG Zuvak, The Life and Times of a Clown on a Stick, I brought in the character of Lily. I gave her the new name of Lily, by the way. She was originally called Lust. But anyway, I brought her in and I started developing lore for her. You know, the story of how she'd built up the company and to carry out some evil master plan, and how she played a major role in the creation of Zuvak. And only after I'd created that lore, I realized it fit perfectly with the Shadow. I almost went ahead with it. I mean, after all, Chris hadn't made PCGs in many years, so I didn't think he was ever going to do anything with these characters. But then I hesitated and I thought, well, you know, it doesn't hurt to ask first. So I asked, like, hey, Chris, do you know who the Shadow is? And he was like, yeah. He did know who the Shadow is. And I was like, well, are we ever going to find out? And he was like, I don't know, probably. Dang it. But it's got to be Lily, right? Like, she's in the right place at the right time. We already know she's involved in the early history of the company. Like it's her. Like, come on. It's just her. But no, Chris wouldn't have known about that or thought about it when he planned out who the Shadow would be. So we should probably think of somebody else. But who even are the other suspects, right? I mean, we need someone who's been around over long periods of time, and, you know, obviously being powerful and charismatic is a plus. So that rules out the rich kid, since, well, I mean, he's a kid, right? He's the same age as Zach. You know, that wouldn't make much sense. The farmer came from a long time ago, but, you know, that was through time travel, so as far as we know, he ages normally, so he wouldn't have been around in the 1940s. He came from, like, the medieval past, and he was just teleported to the present day, so probably not him. One weird possibility is Genghis. It seems kind of far-fetched since Genghis is such a well-known and beloved character, but Chris would totally do something like that, right? I mean, Genghis has been around for 1,000 years at least, and, you know, he has been sealed in a force field on planet Shree that whole time, but alternate forms of him have appeared while he's been in stasis. It's sort of like part of his, you know, almost as if, like, he's sleeping and those are his dreams, like alternate, you know, forms of him appearing in different worlds. And even though he's a character I created, he's someone Chris was definitely aware of the whole time and has used him before in his PCGs, so we know Chris has an interest in Genghis' story. Another possibility that came to me was James, the British secret agent. So for those not in the know, James is from the Nazi machine, so he was canonically alive in the 1940s. He's helping Zach the whole time. So that would kind of make it, like, if he was the Shadow, right, James would have been, like, right there with Zach, and he would have been able to keep tabs on what Zach is doing. And that would sort of help him to manipulate everything, like, this whole time. And he is kind of, like, conspicuous, right? He's perfect, prim and proper, very by the book. You know, he seems to be against the Shadow. So he's the kind of guy you would never suspect, but, you know, I could see that being the case. James is sort of like, he just kind of there. He also, in PCG Anniversary Special 2, James weirdly appears in the present day without explanation in an era where the Shadow is also active. So, you know, we've got two guys from the 1940s, both of whom are weirdly still alive and still in the present day. You know, maybe one is the other, maybe they're the same. Of course, you know, in PCG Anniversary Special 2, they're telling us it's because of all the weird reality warping stuff going on. So that could be it, but maybe that's just a cover. Maybe it's just like, well, you don't suspect it because of the, you know, there's an explanation for why James would be here in the present day. But maybe there is more to it than just the reality warping stuff. Maybe it's James, but I don't know. I mean, then you've got, you know, other PCG characters like, you know, the Archmage. Like, the Archmage does kind of look like the Shadow, right? He's got that shadowy face with the red eyes. Though the Archmage is just another figure whose true identity is hidden. We now know the Archmage is secretly Raal Graxin, a demon, but I doubt Chris even knows who Raal Graxin even is.
Chris.
Yeah, what's up?
Which character do you like better, Yipit or Raal Graxon?
What?
Yeah, Yipit.
You're bothering me with this nonsense. I don't even know who Rafael Krux is.
You don't know who Raal Graxon is? Very interesting.
Wait, I don't like what I'm hungry.
I mean, it would fit decently well, and I mean that could be a theory video of its own. But like, we need to narrow this down, and I think we should focus on characters like Chris at least knows about. I mean, there aren't even that many PCG characters that Chris either created or knows about, and who also fit the evidence that we have. Like, it's probably not Zuvak, since Zuvak was created way later than the Shadow. He would have been creating himself, so that doesn't make a ton of sense. I mean, most of Zach's friends in, his PCGs are based on my friends from real life, like Ari, Colette, and Chris, but I doubt it's any of them. I mean, they're kids, so they wouldn't have been alive in the 1940s, so the timing doesn't really fit. Well, one interesting possibility is, what if it's Zach? Because when Zach teleported back in time in the Nazi machine, apparently he already had a history in the 1940s, as if he'd already been living in the 1940s. People knew him. He had stories of him, living as a secret agent in the 1940s. He was called Agent Zach. He had, family that was alive at that time, and he was reporting to General Stone of the U.S. Military. So, like, he had an established existence. So that means it seems like there was a version of Zach living in the 1940s. That's interesting. Now, once again, you could attribute that to the weird reality warping stuff that had been going on, that Zach's life had sort of been doubled throughout time. And yeah, that does make sense. But that doesn't preclude him also being the Shadow. Maybe the Shadow was caused, the Shadow's very existence could have been caused by this weird reality warping stuff that happened. So maybe there was a 1940s version of Zach living his own life, and maybe he became the Shadow. So this is supported by the fact that when Zach first appeared in the 1940s, it was in a shack. And the shack he was in, the one he appeared in, was the one where the Shadow had been in moments before, and the Russians were bombing that shack in an attempt to destroy the Shadow. So that's interesting. Why would Zach in particular have appeared there? Because if we're going with the idea that, like, present-day Zach, right, if his consciousness was transported back in time and merged with the consciousness of past Zach, he would have appeared where past Zach was at that moment. And why would past Zach have been in a shack where the Shadow was? Well, it would make sense then if he was the Shadow. So that would kind of make sense, right? Knowing Chris would go for an impactful villain, someone who, like, if once you find out who it is, your mind's gonna be blown, right? Like, and finding out it's Zach that Zach's been fighting, or at least another version of him, that would totally be the kind of thing Chris would totally go for. But then again, we don't really know much about 1940 Zach, except that he was an agent for the US government and he'd carried out a bunch of successful missions. So he doesn't really have a motive that we know of. So that is kind of a big stumbling block. But then again, for that matter, who does have a motive, right? Genghis doesn't have a motive either, since, Genghis' interest is in liberating his planet from the Kroden. And the Kroden are part of the Shadow Alliance, so if he were the Shadow, he'd be fighting himself. Though, I mean, I suppose he could be mind-controlled to be turned into the Shadow? I don't know. Now, James, well, we don't really know much about James. I mean, we know he's very by the book. He's very shocked by Zach's off-the-cuff methods, which would be weird if he was also evil. But then again, evil people can be very regimented. They can like to follow the rules. He does share Zach's dislike of General Stone, but that isn't really a motive on its own. Like, so we don't really have, any reason to really assume it's him. So I'm really kind of grasping at straws with James. You know who does have a motive? Lily! It's Lily, you guys! Like, she's known to have manipulated the company to her own ends in a scheme to take over the world, like the Shadow does, right? She would want to put together the Shadow Alliance to achieve what she was never able to before. She had designs to unite humanity under sort of her rule so she could impart secrets to them. She's a literal shadow. Like, come on. It's Lily. It's Lily. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on. Well, okay. What even is the scheme here? Like, what is even the plan? Like, before we solve the mystery, we should figure out what crime is even being committed here, right? So, in PCG Anniversary Special 2, we see reality getting fuzzy, right? Green bubbles are appearing in multiple worlds and spreading, and some worlds are getting scrambled. Now, we find out that the Shadow took over the world when we get back from Grizel. I have this interesting conversation with the Shadow, projecting his face into the sky. The skies are all red, and we see in the city that reality's been warped, you know, like streets are no longer taking their correct forms, they're sort of like looping around, and people are in the places they shouldn't be and not in the places they should be. Everything's weird and mixed around.
Zach, so nice of you to join us. I've been making changes in your absence. Pleasant little dimension for me to conquer.
So that's interesting. Does that mean the Shadow is an extra-dimensional villain? Is he from a different universe? That could be. Maybe he's someone from Grizel. If so, it's someone we haven't really met, probably. Unless it's Super Bard. Is it Super Bard? Like, I don't know. He's just a little too conspicuous, just kind of like innocently playing his songs in taverns. But okay. In that conversation, I asked him, you know,
Shadow, how'd you get the power to do this?
Oh, Zach, when have I not had the power to do this? I've just been biding my time.
Now, we don't know what all this weird reality warping stuff is going on. It could quite possibly, it seems like that is being caused by the Shadow, and it might even go back to Till Time Do Us Part, where we see that weird figure, who we now know to be the Shadow, standing over a crystal ball. So a wave of energy emerges from it, and after that, Zach just, you know, at the beginning of the next game, we find out that Zach just woke up at home. How did he get there? That's weird. Now, I don't know if this is true, but I've always made a connection between that figure standing over the crystal ball and what happens at the end of the next game, Relics of the Sea, where after an aquatic adventure, Zach was swept up in a wave of energy as the universe tore itself apart, like reality was coming apart at the seams. And that process, you know, once the world put itself back together, that actually led to the creation of the multiverse, with alternate universes such as Grizel, as we saw in Ginkis's Gift. Wait, oh my god, the title of that game, Ginkis's Gift. Maybe Ginkis's Gift is the creation of the multiverse. Maybe that was his goal all along. I mean, it is true that the sphere that the Shadow is standing over is similar to the Ginkis orb from Ginkis's Gift. But then again, the multiverse has already been created, right? So what's he doing now? Like that already happened, like way back in Series 2. So what's the scheme now in PCG Anniversary Special 2? Well, we know he took over the world, right? Using his apparently world-altering powers, as we've seen before. We know he built the Nazi machine and sold it to the Nazis, and we know the Nazi machine was kind of a predecessor to Zuvak. Which suggests that it's Lily, because she's canonically confirmed to have played a role in the creation of Zuvak. Like, oh my god, it's Lily. It's Lily, you guys. Oh my god. So yeah, I don't know. We're just sort of like confounded. I've just been sort of like staring into this information, and I'm just starting to think we might just not have, you know, enough information to figure it all out. I mean, here's the thing, right? Like, if we were going by in-universe information only, I definitely would go with Lily. Like, hands down. Just come on, guys. Come on. It's just her. It's just Lily. Out of all the characters we've looked at, she's the only one with opportunity and the motive to be the Shadow. She was in the 1940s canonically and in the right place to have created the company at the right time, and she canonically had an evil plan to take over the world using the company. It also fits because the Shadow created the Nazi machine, and Chris confirmed that Zuvak is sort of an evolved form of the Nazi machine's design, and Lily played a role in creating Zuvak. So it would fit perfectly for her to be the one who created the original and just kept improving it over the course of the decades. And I mean, come on, she's literally a Shadow. Like, it's freaking Lily, you guys. It's Lily, come on. But realistically, I can't ignore the artists making these games, right? There's just no way that Chris would have thought to make the Shadow be Lily, especially since all that lore with her being a part of the company wouldn't be revealed until way after Chris had already figured out who the Shadow was. I don't think he even knows that character too well. Well, it's not impossible since he did fight her in Zuvak: The Life and Times of a Clown on a Stick, but based on all that, I have to make a theory based on what I think Chris would actually make. Now, when I was originally conceiving this video, I thought I was going to go with James as the suspect. You know, James would be a good theory because he's inconspicuous. You know, he's someone you wouldn't suspect. But he was in the right place at the right time. He was in the 1940s, a secret agent, so maybe he could have done it. It is weird that he randomly shows up in the present day in PCG Anniversary Special 2. We dismiss that as being because of the weird fluctuations in space and time going on. But it could be more than that. Maybe it's because he's immortal and he's the Shadow. But the problem is we just don't know enough about James, so we can't really have a motive for him. It still could be him, but I don't have enough reason to conclude it is based on the evidence that we have. So, weird as it is to say, I think the best theory I can come up with is Ginkus. It fits because Ginkus is one of the few characters who might have the kind of power to do the things we've seen the Shadow do. Ginkus, well, at least it's possible he could have been in the right place at the right time. I mean, he's existed for 1,000 years, during which multiple versions of him pop up on other worlds. That sounds sketchy, but what really draws me to Ginkus is his staff. Now, when I draw a Ginkus, the top of his staff was always this sort of metal spiral thing, which power comes out of. But in Chris's game, Ginkus's Gift, the top of his staff is this glowing red orb. And in that game, when Zack gets the orb and it lets him cast powerful magic spells with the power of Ginkus, one might say reality warping spells. Well, the orb is similar to this orb that we saw the Shadow standing over until time do us part, and both do seem to have incredible powers. And part of the story in the Nazi machine is that what makes the machine so powerful is a strange power source that the Shadow put into it. That could be the orb as well. So, the Shadow being Ginkus also fits from a real-world perspective because Chris totally knows Ginkus and he's shown interest in incorporating him into his stories before, and that would be an incredibly impactful reveal, which is the kind of thing Chris would totally go for. Now, I'm not really satisfied with this theory either because we don't have a motive for Ginkus. Like, why would he do this? He'd be fighting against his own interests and we have no reason why. But that's the thing, we don't really know what the Shadow's master plan is. Like, if it's true that the Shadow did create the wave that tore apart the universe in Relics of the Sea, well, that event caused the creation of the multiverse, many other universes with full histories, and that's a good thing, right? And that's totally something that Ginkus would want to do. So, that doesn't explain why he would create the company, though, and for that matter, we don't even know what the current plan is in PCG Anniversary Special 2. But maybe, because we don't know what it is, maybe we shouldn't assume it's a bad thing. Maybe, like the energy wave in Relics of the Sea, maybe the plan in Anniversary Special will, it'll seem scary at first, but maybe once it's enacted, it'll be something great for the multiverse and beyond. Maybe he's creating something immeasurable. I mean, if the first time, that energy wave created the whole freaking multiverse, endless universes full of life, who knows what incredible stuff this plan in PCG Anniversary Special 2 could create. Or it could be some evil plan to take over the universe, who knows? This is all just speculation. We really don't know. We really don't have a motive for him, but it's kind of the best I can do. There just really aren't that many good suspects. So yeah, That's the best I can do for right now, but dang it, it's Lily! Thank you folks for watching, and PCG you later.